Hello and welcome to your English news broadcast live on ERi-TV. It's exactly 10:30 p.m. on Eritrea's local time from our headquarters at Asmara with your domestic and international news in brief. I'm Zahra Badouri, but first we'll begin with your major headlines for this broadcast. On your primary domestic financial contribution in support of families of Eritreans. Efforts to avoid harmful practices and more on domestic. On your international, fighting between rival militias rocks in Libyan capital, Tripoli. Iran, Venezuela sign a 20-year cooperation plan during Maduro's visit and more on your international. Welcome to your domestic in brief. Nationals in South Sudan, the U.S. and Germany extended $27,780, over 4,000 euros, as well as over 57,000 nakfa in support of families of Eritreans as your primary domestic. According to reports from the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, nationals in South Sudan contributed $14,380, 7 nationals residing in Michigan, the U.S. $13,400, 10 nationals in Mannheim, Germany, 4,200 euros, and Eritrean communities in Manningham and its environs contributed 57,650 nakfa. In the same vein, staff members of Dubarwa subzone administration extended material support worth 50,000 nakfa to members of defense force in their area. The Office of the National Union of Eritrean Women in Kirkabet subzone called for strong effort to avoid harmful practices through increasing the awareness of the public in general and that of women in particular, indicating that effort to avoid harmful practices that are negatively affecting the health and development is not to be left to one institution only. Mrs. Fatma Abubakar, head of the union branch in the subzone, called for integrated effort on the part of all institutions and the public, pointing out that underage marriages, FGM, and other harmful practices are still continuing. Mrs. Fatma called on all stakeholders to play due role in the effort to avoid the harmful practices. Mr. Abdul Karim Idris, administrator of the subzone, on his part said that the freeing women from applying harmful practices and ensuring overall participation of the public in the effort is part of the national building process, and called for reinforced participation in that effort. On your preceding and final domestic, staff members of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are conducting water and soil conservation popular campaign since 10th of this June at My Dimet area. According to the coordinator of the popular campaign, the program is to construct 400 meters of terraces, and over 100 staff members of the ministry are involved every week, indicating that with the beginning of the rainy season, they will plant tree seedlings in the area. The coordinator expressed that they will conduct regular follow-up of the tree seedlings they will plant to ensure their sustainability, pointing out that Eritrea is located in the area that is exposed to deforestation. The coordinators called on the public to readdress the environment through planting trees. Do stay tuned for more on your domestic, on your international. And on your global report, clashes between armed groups have erupted in Libya's capital, Tripoli, according to local media, as the country's real aimed a violent power struggle. Heavy exchanges of gunfire and explosions resounded across several districts of Tripoli on Friday night, while images broadcast by local press and circulated on social media showed civilians fleeing heavily trafficked areas. Local media reported medical sources saying that 4 civilians were wounded in the clashes. The tense fighting involved two influential militants from western Libya, militias from western Libya, accordingly to the local media, which identified armed groups as the Nawasi Brigade, a militia loyal to political faith, Bashgai, a stability support force, which backs Inter Premier Abdul Hamid Baidiba. No motive from the fighting was immediately apparent, however, but it is the latest violence to rock the country as two rival prime ministers vie for power. After a 2011 revolt toppled longtime director Muammar Gaddafi political last month, Bashaga attempted to seize power by force, sparking pre-dawn clashes between armed groups supporting him and those backing Badiba. Badiba was appointed under a troubled United Nations-led peace process early last year to lead the tensions to elections set for December 2021, but the vote was identifiably postponed. In February, Parliament appointed Bashaga a one-term interior minister to take over, arguing the Badiba's mandate had ended. But Badiba has instead insisted he will only relinquish power to an elected administration. Iran and Venezuela have signed a 20-year cooperation roadmap during a state visit by President Nicolás Maduro to Tehran, as the two oil-rich countries reeling under United States sanctioned pledged to boost bilateral ties. The Venezuelan president met his Iranian counterpart, Ibrahim Raisi, on Saturday at the Sadabad Palace in Tehran, a day after arriving in the Iranian capital with a high-level political and economical delegation on a two-day trip. In a joint conference following their meeting, the two hailed rising bilateral relations to the strategic level and agreed that the two countries can boost ties in trade in addition to the energy, science and technology, agriculture and tourism sectors. The cooperation roadmap, the exact details of which have been kept under wrap, was signed by the foreign minister of the two countries in the presence of their respective presidents. The delegations from both countries discussed details of the future cooperation as the leaders focused on issues of mutual cooperation on economic issues aimed crippling economic crisis due to sanctions. Raisi said, sitting next to Maduro, that the Islamic Republic of Iran's foreign policy has always been to have relations with independent countries, and Venezuela showed it has had incredible resistance against threats and sanctions by enemies and imperialism. Once more on your final report, Australia has unveiled a substantial compensation deal with France submarine maker Naval Group, ending a contract dispute that soured relations between Canberra and Paris for almost a year. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said on Saturday that the French firm had agreed to a fair and an equitable settlement of €555 million for Australia, ending a 10-year-old multi-billion-dollar submarine contract. The agreement drew a line under a spat that caused leader-level recriminations and threats to torpedo talk on a European Union-Australian trade agreement. French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu said that it permits them to turn a page in their bilateral relations with Australia and look to the future. Albanese said he would travel to France soon to reset a relationship to be set by pretty obvious tensions. The tussle began in September 2021, however, when Australia then Prime Minister Scott Morrison abruptly ripped up a long-standing contract with a French state-backed naval to build a dozen diesel-powered submarines. Dear viewers, that is all for now with your reports for this broadcast. Until we are back with some more news, stay and enjoy the rest of our programs. But until then, these are your major headlines for this broadcast in review. Financial contribution in support of families of martyrs as your primary domestic. Effort to avoid harmful practices and water and soil conservation in a popular campaign by the Foreign Affairs. Fighting between rival militias rocking Libyan capital Tripoli on your initial international. Iranian Venezuela signs 20-year cooperation plan during Maduro's visit, and more as Australia agrees payout to end France's submarine spat. Thanks for watching and have a nice one.